If you honestly think you're going to get into med school without at least a 3.9 GPA and a 520 MCAT score, you need to watch this video. Because I've been helping people get into medical school for about 10 years, and the amount of misinformation out there is crazy. But today, we're going to dive into the actual matriculant data from the AAMC and see what kind of metrics people who got into med school this year have. I'm going to be using my head as a pointer because it's very shiny and round. Now I want you to see here that we're going to be looking at data for the subsections of the MCAT, followed by the total MCAT score. That's what we're going to focus on first, and then we'll dive into the GPA after we talk about MCAT. For simplicity, we're going to ignore all of the previous year's data here. So last academic year, the year before, we're just going to look over on this side for the current academic year. So the matriculant data for people who are first-year medical students right now as you're watching this video. The mean total MCAT score was 512.1 with a standard deviation of 6.5. So let's talk about what that means. Gonna have to orient us real quick to some basic statistics which you may have forgotten from your undergraduate course. This is a standard bell curve, a normal distribution. Again, follow the tip of my head and you'll see that 68% of the data are going to be within one standard deviation. Okay, one standard deviation, and 95% of the data will fall between two standard deviations with the rest of the data outside of that. So we're just going to focus here on the within one standard deviation, within two standard deviations. So if we subtract one standard deviation from this, we get 505.6. And if we subtract another standard deviation, we get 499.1. And again, I'm just doing this in my head, so forgive me if I'm wrong. If you add one standard deviation, we're going to get 518.6. And if you add another standard deviation, that would be 525.1. So 95% of people who got in would have had an MCAT score between 499 or so and 525 or so, with the majority of those being between that first standard deviation. So very clearly, you do not need a 520 on the MCAT to get into medical school. You don't even need a 510. There are people who had probably below a 505 who've gone into medical school just based on these data. And I can tell you anecdotally, because I'm an admission consultant and I work with people with all of these different scores, that yes, people that low and that high have gotten in. Reorienting ourselves here, we're next going to look at the science GPA, non-science GPA. I'm going to focus on the GPA total. Do you have any idea how many messages I get from people saying that they've been told by credible sources they need to have at least a 3.9 to have a chance of even getting an interview at med school? Let's look at the actual numbers, please. The mean isn't even a 3.9. It's a 3.81 with a 0.2 standard deviation. Again, subtract 0.21 from that 3.81 and you get a 3.6. Subtract another 0.21, you get a 3.39. So you'll see the majority of the people are probably going to be above a 3.39, and there are probably going to be a couple of outliers a little bit below that. Remember, though, that this does not capture master's degree data. So if people have a special master's, that's not factored in here. This is just undergrad and post-bac. This also doesn't capture any DO applicants, and this is not the data for Texas. This is just the AAMC, the US MD School Broad National Application data. I'm bringing this up because people have really extreme opinions about the metrics you need to get into medical school. 10 years of experience tell me it's about a lot more than the numbers, and most of the time people overestimate the minimums that they need to have to get taken seriously, and they really underestimate how many different ways there are to show up well on the application. People have different strengths. They distinguish themselves in different ways. We didn't even talk about all the data on the different experiences that people have when they matriculate to medical school. They're not the same, and you'd be surprised. A lot of the things that your anxious pre-med friends tell you need to have are not absolutes. So do your best at every part of the application, and also don't write yourself off just because you're not perfect. The perfect is the enemy of the good. You've got this.